Loneliness is not always about the absence of people. Often, it's about the aching silence that grows when we feel invisible, when our presence goes unnoticed, our voice unheard, and our worth questioned. Many men don't just feel alone. They feel unworthy of being loved at all. This pain hides beneath polite smiles, overachievement, and quiet resignation. And while some may dismiss it as weakness or emotional immaturity, what lies beneath is something far more human and far more tragic. In this video, we're not just asking why some men feel unlovable. We're confronting the hidden roots of that belief and offering a new lens through which to understand it. This isn't about labeling or diagnosing. It's about compassion. It's about reclaiming the right to feel, to heal, and to be seen. For many boys, the earliest lesson they learn about emotion is that it's dangerous to feel, not because anyone tells them explicitly, but because of the subtle cues they receive: raised eyebrows when they cry, awkward silences when they seek comfort, jokes that label sensitivity as weakness. Over time, these moments shape a silent agreement. To be accepted, they must trade vulnerability for strength and connection for control. This emotional suppression is not simply a habit. It's a survival mechanism passed down through generations. It teaches them that in order to be respected, they must remain unreadable. But what begins as self-protection becomes self-denial. They grow into men who no longer know how to interpret the signals of their own hearts. And without the language to express pain, desire, or fear, they begin to believe that love is a reward given only to those who never need it. The damage doesn't always show in obvious ways. It may appear as detachment in relationships, restlessness in careers, or the inability to accept affection without suspicion. When love has been taught as something conditional, offered only when we meet expectations, it's no wonder so many grow to feel undeserving of it. Yet buried under the armor is a deep, unspoken longing to be known without the pressure to perform. From the moment boys begin to interact with the world beyond their homes, they are bombarded with definitions of worth that have little to do with who they are and everything to do with what they can achieve. Success becomes a performance, not a journey. Validation is reserved for those who climb highest, earn the most, lift the heaviest, or speak the loudest. This cultural script doesn't just influence career paths, it seeps into how men define their right to be loved. A man who cannot live up to these standards may begin to question his very place in the world. The pressure is rarely acknowledged openly, yet it's ever present, etched in the curated highlight reels on social media, reinforced by careless comparisons in conversations, and magnified by silent insecurities that whisper, "You're not enough." And because men are so often taught to seek identity in status or strength, the absence of these things doesn't just create disappointment, it births shame. This shame is corrosive. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It convinces men to hide their failures, minimize their emotions, and chase impossible ideals in a desperate attempt to feel worthy. Love, in this framework, becomes a prize that must be earned, not a human need, but a trophy reserved for those who've proved themselves exceptional. And so, countless men carry a silent burden, believing that unless they succeed in measurable terms, they do not deserve connection, affection, or care. Yet what society rarely teaches, what many men only discover after years of emptiness, is that worthiness is not granted by wealth, beauty, or accolades. Real connection arises not from perfection, but from presence. It blooms in the small, unfiltered moments where authenticity is allowed to breathe, where two people meet each other without masks or expectations. When love becomes something we believe we must qualify for, we miss the truth entirely. Love, in its truest form, does not demand credentials, it only asks for courage. Not all wounds bleed. Some are silent, invisible to the outside world, but heavy enough to shape the way someone moves through life. Rejection is one of those wounds, and for many men, it doesn't come just once. It arrives in waves, unanswered. Texts, fading interest, dates that vanish into silence, affections that go unreturned. What begins as disappointment slowly mutates into something more sinister, a belief that perhaps the problem isn't the situation, but themselves. When rejection becomes a pattern, it no longer feels like a random event. It starts to feel like a confirmation. You're not enough. You're too much. You're not what they want. And the cruel irony is that the more these messages settle in, the more guarded one becomes. In trying to protect themselves from future pain, many men begin to shut down emotionally, suppressing the very openness that could foster genuine connection. Ghosting, especially, delivers a unique kind of cruelty. It offers no closure, no explanation, just a vanishing act that leaves the mind spinning in search of reasons. This emotional limbo often triggers obsessive overthinking. Was I too eager? Too vulnerable? Not attractive enough? Over time, these unanswered questions can calcify into hard beliefs, shaping a self-image that says, I'm not someone people stay for. The impact runs deeper than heartbreak. It alters how a man approaches relationships altogether. He may become hesitant to express interest, suspicious of affection, or emotionally distant, even when deeply desiring intimacy. A wall forms, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to avoid feeling disposable ever again. Sadly, this defense mechanism often creates the very loneliness it was meant to prevent. But rejection, no matter how painful, is not a verdict on one's worth. It's not proof of being unlovable. It's often just a mismatch, a misunderstanding, or someone else's inability to show up fully. When we stop viewing rejection as a mirror and start seeing it as a redirection, healing becomes possible. The key lies in gently separating personal value from temporary outcomes and understanding that the right connection doesn't demand you to be anything other than your honest self. There is a quiet war that many men are fighting, a war with no uniform, no medals, no visible wounds. It wages itself internally, masked behind daily routines and forced smiles. This battle is not against the world, but against the self. The inner voice that says, you're a burden, you're broken, you don't matter. Anxiety, depression, and unresolved trauma often whisper these lies until they start to sound like truth. Mental health struggles are not always dramatic. Sometimes they manifest as a man who shows up every day, gets the job done, keeps conversations light, and goes home feeling hollow. They appear in the way he hesitates before speaking honestly, or the way he laughs at his own pain so others don't have to feel uncomfortable. These men are not weak. They are simply exhausted from carrying emotions they've never been taught how to process. Low self-esteem doesn't always scream either. It often looks like over-apologizing, people-pleasing, pushing away support out of fear of being too much or settling for relationships that don't nourish the soul, simply because they don't believe they deserve better. When you see yourself as defective, love begins to feel like a threat rather than a refuge, something that, if accepted, will only expose your flaws more clearly. Tragically, many men internalize these struggles as personal failure rather than emotional injury. And because the world rarely makes space for their vulnerability, they retreat further into silence. But mental health is not a measure of character. It is not a reflection of weakness or lack of masculinity. In truth, it often takes far more strength to admit that you're struggling than it does to pretend that you're fine. Healing begins when that silence is broken, not through grand declarations, but through small, brave steps. Talking to a friend, seeking therapy, journaling feelings, or simply admitting, I'm not okay. These acts are not admissions of defeat. They are signs of life. They are the beginning of rebuilding a self-worth that is rooted in humanity, not perfection. And in that space, love no longer feels like an impossible dream. It becomes a possibility once more. For generations, men have been handed a script that glorifies endurance over emotion, silence over struggle, and self-reliance over support. They are told that seeking help is a sign of fragility, a betrayal of strength, a crack in the armor they've spent their whole lives building. And so, many walk through life quietly drowning, convinced that if they just push harder, smile wider, or stay busy enough, the pain will eventually disappear. But pain that isn't voiced doesn't vanish. It festers. It disguises itself in anger, in addiction, in detachment. It creeps into relationships, poisons self-worth, and carves distance between people who care. When men are shamed into believing that needing help makes them weak, they often suffer in isolation, turning away from the very support that could save them. This stigma is not just cultural, it's personal. It lives in phrases like, "I should be able to handle this on my own," or "other people have it worse," or "if I open up, they'll see how broken I really am." These thoughts become barriers not just to healing, but to connection. And as they go unchecked, they reinforce the most dangerous lie of all: that love is something only whole people deserve. But what if vulnerability wasn't a flaw, but a bridge? What if acknowledging your wounds wasn't shameful, but sacred? The truth is that the most powerful transformations often begin not with answers, but with the courage to say, "I need help." Seeking therapy, talking to a trusted friend, joining a support group, these are not admissions of weakness, they are declarations of worth. They are acts of rebellion against a culture that tells men to suffer quietly. When men choose to face the parts of themselves they've been told to hide, they don't become less, they become more. More honest, more connected, more free. And, in that freedom, the ability to give and receive love is no longer stifled by fear, it is unlocked by authenticity. The belief that one is unlovable doesn't arrive overnight. It's built slowly, over time, layered with rejection, silence, and internalized shame. But just as this belief was constructed, it can also be dismantled, with care, intention, and patience. Rebuilding self-worth is not about becoming someone new. It's about peeling back the layers of self-protection to rediscover who you were, before the world convinced you that you weren't enough. The first step in that journey is learning to listen to the voice within, and then challenging it. Many men carry a relentless inner critic that whispers cruel judgments on repeat. "You're not lovable. You always ruin things. You're better off alone." These thoughts are not truths, they are echoes of past pain. Writing them down, confronting their origin, and replacing them with more compassionate, reality-based beliefs is an act of self-respect, not self-indulgence. But healing doesn't happen in isolation. Emotional reconnection begins in safe spaces, with people who see past your defenses and respond with care, not correction. Whether it's a therapist, a longtime friend, or a mentor, opening up, even just a little, can begin to break the cycle of disconnection. You don't have to share everything all at once. Sometimes healing starts with one honest sentence. "I've been feeling lost lately." From there, it's about choosing small actions that honor your worth. Join a group that reflects your interests. Say yes to a coffee invite. Reach out to someone you've been meaning to call. These are not grand gestures. They're quiet rebellions against the belief that you don't belong. Over time, these moments accumulate. They build evidence that you are, in fact, capable of connection, trust, and joy. And through it all, self-compassion is the thread that must be woven into every step. Healing is not a straight line. There will be days when you fall back into old patterns, when you feel unworthy again. But progress isn't measured by perfection. It's measured by persistence. Every time you choose to show up for yourself, even when it's hard, you are rewriting the story of who you are and what you deserve. Somewhere along the way, many men absorb a devastating lie: that love is a transaction, a prize for the accomplished, a reward for those who perform well enough, hide their flaws convincingly, or carry their burdens without complaint. They begin to believe that only after they've fixed themselves will they be worthy of connection. And so they chase perfection, polish their pain into silence, and wait for the day they'll finally be good enough to be loved. But that day never comes. Because love, real love, has never operated by those rules. Love is not earned. It's not a currency exchanged for confidence, looks, or success. It's not reserved for the few who have mastered the art of hiding their insecurities. True love, whether romantic, platonic, or self-directed, is rooted in presence, not performance. It flourishes in authenticity, in the quiet courage to be seen not as an ideal, but as you are. Imperfect, evolving, human. The deepest relationships are not forged through perfection, but through vulnerability. They are built in the moments when someone says, "I see your wounds, and I'm staying anyway." That kind of love is not weak. It's fierce. It does not shame you for your story. It honors the road you've walked to get here. And more importantly, it invites you to stop fighting for worth you already possess. You are not unlovable. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not alone in your longing. You are human, and in that humanity lies the very reason you are worthy. Not someday, not if you achieve more, not when you've healed completely, but now. Exactly as you are. And the moment you begin to believe that, even just a little, is the moment the world begins to meet you differently too. So speak kindly to yourself. Reach for connection, even when it feels risky. Let yourself be seen, not in curated pieces, but in full. Because love isn't waiting for your perfection, it's waiting for your permission.